Welcome to Brick by Brick, Building Wealth Through Homeownership. I am Kim Von Dohren, your Realtor.
And I'm your banker, Ed Marko. Kim, how does someone know when it's the right time for them to buy a home?
So buying a home is one of the largest purchases that a person's going to make in their lifetime. Some people will make larger, but most average people are spending the largest amount of money they're ever going to spend when they buy, particularly their first home. So I know everyone has the dream of home ownership. And I think considering what is it that I want from buying a home, and then asking yourself, am I in a place mentally, psychologically prepared personally to be a homeowner? Because buying a home is the process, but owning the home is the actual experience. And that's the part I think people really need to be sure they're ready for what comes with home ownership. Secondly, people always wonder about the market. When should I buy? Should I buy in the spring? That seems to be the busy time in the market. Since we've had a surplus problem for more than 5+ years, there's not a ton of homes on the market. And so unfortunately, it doesn't necessarily matter what time of year it is. There are people who still subscribe to the theory that the spring is the best time to put your home on the market. So we tend to get more homes on the market in the spring. So you might have additional choices in the spring. But honestly, any time of year is a good time to buy a home. And then lastly, when is the right time to buy a home for you financially? Are you prepared financially to move forward with the process of buying a home? Well, as a realtor, one of the very first questions I'm going to ask you when you come to me is, have you gone to a lender and been pre-qualified to purchase? And that's where you come in, Ed. As the lender, I'm going to send them now to you to see, can they be pre-qualified? So can you tell folks what is pre-qualification and what is the process?
Right. So getting pre-qualified is, I think, probably the first step of making it the biggest purchase you're ever going to make. And the idea behind the pre-qualification is to have a lender, we're going to check your credit. It's a hard pull too. It's going to be on all three credit bureaus. So you want to make sure that your credit's in order. We can have a conversation about that one day, perhaps. But we're going to check your credit. We're going to look at your work history. We're going to look at your income, and we're going to look at your assets. And by assets, I mean, what do you have financially? How much money do you have? How much do you have in checking? How much do you have in savings? Do you have a 401k? Where are you getting the money that you're going to use for down payment and closing costs? And we're going to want to document all of that. So you're going to want to have, your W-2s for the last couple or 3 years handy. You want to know how to get into your HR department to get your pay stubs if you don't get a paper pay stub, and most people don't. And then you're going to want to know how to get your bank statements and how to get those saved to your computer or printed or whatever it is you have to do to get those bank statements. Most people probably should have 2 or 3 years worth of tax returns at their available too. We're going to take all of that information, we're going to digest it, and we're going to determine what you qualify to spend, how much money a month you can afford to put into a home. And we're going to take that payment that we can understand that you can afford, and that we can extrapolate into how much of a house you can buy. So we're going to give you a letter at that point that says we've done all this for you, and you're going to be able to hand that pre-qualification letter to a real estate agent so that they can see that you are qualified to purchase a home. It's been my experience that real estate agents don't even want to talk to people unless they have a pre-qualification letter from a lender. And usually it's a lender that they really like. I mean, what are your thoughts on that, Kim, as far as people getting pre-qualification letters from the internet, say, from an unknown lender?
So pre-qualifications from online lenders, there's some well-known ones out there that people feel like they are a safe bet because they see them on the television. I would say their process of pre-qualifying someone isn't as thorough or as reliable as someone who I work with on a regular basis, and I know their process, and I know that they're going to get my client to closing. So if you come to me with an online pre-qualification, I'm not saying you can't use them, because ultimately it is the buyer's choice to use whatever lender they like. But I am going to be sure that you are truly pre-qualified by asking you to get pre-qualified with a local lender as well. You do not have to use them, but I would at least want that so that I'm aware that you truly are pre-qualified and for what amount. So the question I have for you, which I know the answer, but I need for you to tell folks, is with regard to the items that you ask for in a pre-qualification, if I have a job where I get overtime, does that count as income for my pre-qualification?
So that's a great question. And the answer to that is it depends. So generally what's going to happen is the underwriter is the ultimate decision maker when it comes down to that. And the underwriter is going to request from the employer what's called a VOE, or verification of employment and income. And if that employer says that we anticipate this overtime to continue for the next 3 to 5 years, we're going to allow it. Most employers won't make that statement though. So you really need to be leery about whether or not you can count overtime income as disposable income. It's usually just that, it's overtime. There are rare exceptions. I'm not going to say no, but you need to really rethink your math, or how you're spending money if you're relying on that income. That overtime income is not reliable.
Right,
It's just not reliable.
right. So with regard to assets,
Mhm.
what are you looking for with regard to assets?
So, like I said, we're only concerned with financial assets. I say this in jest to everybody that I talk to. I'm only concerned with your money, checking account, savings account, 401k. Do you have a stock portfolio? Anything that would be construed as money, liquid assets, or money. Maybe a 401k isn't liquid, but you can liquidate it and turn it into money. Things that I don't care about are planes, trains, automobiles, paintings, all that kind of stuff. None of that has any value when it comes to purchasing a home. The other thing when it comes to assets, too, financial assets, is those assets need to be identifiable. Where did they come from? So it can't be cash that you have under your pillow. It needs to be in a recognized financial institution for at least 2 or 3 months in order for it to be used to purchase a house. And that's to prevent money laundering. That's a RICO law. Your lender can't make an exception under any circumstances for any of that. Only money that you had in the bank that's been there for, I would say, a minimum of two, perhaps at least 3 months. So it's verifiable cash that belongs to you. And gifts. I mean, if you've got, family members or what have you that want to give you gift money, same thing applies to that though. Where just because mom and dad gave you $50,000 doesn't mean that we don't need to know where mom and dad got the $50,000.
So do you then collect statements from them showing they've had that money for 2 or
Exactly.
3 months?
Yes, exactly. We need to see their bank statements. Where did that money come from?
Right. And I understand, as I'm sure you do, we live in a region where some folks like to have cash around. And so I have many clients who have come to me and told me I have, you know, $10,000 in cash. And I've had to say to them, wonderful. I don't know where you're going to spend that, but the bank is not going to acknowledge that you have that money for 2 to 3 months until you put it into an account.
Yeah, that's one of the things we run into a lot in this market. I have a great deal of folks. I do business with a remarkable amount of Amish people, and Amish people are not big on banks, but they do mortgages. So I will sit down with them early in the process and say, look, whatever cash you plan on spending on this house needs to go in a bank now, because it needs to cure. It needs to be in there for 2 or 3 months, and they'll have to go and make the deposit and get it done. But it is the world we live in. It is because of people, drug dealers and what have you, laundering money. We were both around, I think, the last time the housing market had a bad day, and a lot of that had to do with money laundering.
Mhm.
So banks are very, very, very anti-money laundering, and it's a federal requirement. It doesn't matter what we want; it's the way it is.
So the other financial component that you had mentioned is credit.
Mhm.
So you can have tons of income and even have good credit if you have a significant amount of debt. Is that then going to affect
Right.
someone's ability to be pre-qualified?
Right. So a high credit score is great, but yeah, it's all about debt to income ratio. So you can spend, depending on the loan program that you're in, you can spend somewhere between 43 and 49% of your gross income on all debts, including housing. All debts are credit cards, car loans, personal loans, mortgages, things like that. They don't care about your electric bill or your gas bill or anything like that. Property taxes is included in that, though, and homeowners insurance. So if you're making $100,000 a year and you're spending $50,000 of it on, two Jaguars and a whole lot of furniture that you bought for your apartment, and you're paying off a European vacation that cost you $40,000, you're you're not in a good position to buy a home. You want to run your debts down as close to zero so that you qualify for the most home you can qualify for. My father said this to me 100 times while I was growing up, and I didn't understand what he meant until maybe I was 25 years old. When you grow, when you get big, he would say to us, when you get big, drive the cheapest car that you can stand and buy the most expensive house you can afford. And the reason for that is simple. Cars don't go up in value, houses do.
Right.
So if you've got a $100,000 house and it goes up 20% in value, you made $20,000. But if you have $1 million house and it goes up 20% in value, you've made $200,000.
Right.
If you buy a $50,000 car next year, you have a $20,000 car.
Right.
So you want to eliminate debt so that you can afford the most house that you're comfortable buying. And that's what it's really all about. That credit score is it's a number for a lender like me to look at and say, okay, these people know how to pay their bills. That makes me comfortable. Then I look at your actual credit report and I see what those bills are. And it's remarkable how many times I look at those credit reports and I become uncomfortable because people spend money on nonsensical things.
Right. And then you potentially end up in foreclosure. Nobody wants that.
Correct. Yeah.
Right.
No, yeah, that's bears repeating right now. Banks do not want your house.
So how much do they need in assets?
So it depends on what they're buying. If they're buying I like to use the $100,000 because it's easy for math. I don't think you can find a house for $100,000 you'd want to live in
No,
anymore,
you can't.
but it's still easy for math. So if you're a first-time home buyer, you hear all the time, you need to put 20% down, 20% down. Well, that's $20,000. The truth be said, though, a first-time home buyer only needs about 3% down, or in this case, $3,000. So if it's a $300,000 house, more realistic number, you would need $9,000. Imagine if you were trying to come up with 20% down on a $300,000 house, you need $60,000. If you've only got $10,000 and you're going to continue to save for another 2 years, you can try and do that, but I guarantee you in 2 years now you'll have $20,000. You still need $60,000 2 years ago. Now that house is $400,000 and you need $80,000. It's like chasing a dragon.
Right.
I recommend people buy their first home with as little money as possible, even if they have extra money. That one time in your life that you can get away with putting that 3% down, put that 3% down, put that other money to work someplace for you.
Right.
Yeah.
Because you need more than down money, right?
Sure, yeah, you need down payment and closing cost, and that's a big deal. Down payment is the percentage, and then the closing cost, that's a whole other thing. I mean, you need to there's title work, the appraisal, inspections, court fees, transfer taxes. You need to escrow your first year's worth of property taxes. You need to escrow your first. You need to pay your homeowner's insurance a year in advance and a couple of months more of that as well. So till you're said and done, you're looking at 3% down and probably another 3 to 6%, depending on where you're buying your home, in closing costs.
Right. 3 to 6%. Worst case scenario, 6% plus the 3% down. Now
Correct.
you're at 9% of $100,000 you need $9,000 to purchase that home.
Correct.
So it isn't the mindset of, okay, I need a 620 credit score. I need $3,000 to buy this home and now I'm good to go. There are closing
Yeah, there's
costs.
closing costs involved. And then there's other things that really, especially a first-time home buyer, needs to take into consideration. If you've never owned a home before, you're your own landlord now. When the hot water heater goes bad, there's nobody to call.
Correct.
You need to have the money to fix that hot water heater. I recommend to everybody, go to Home Depot or Lowe's every Saturday. There's somebody there putting on a free demonstration on how to fix something in a house, whether it's hot water heaters, installing ceiling fans, how to properly paint, how to prep paint, all that kind of. Learn how to do that. You'll save yourself over your lifetime, literally hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Right.
You know,
And that's the kind of comes back to what I said in the beginning, which is that purchasing a home is a process. Owning a home is the experience. And home ownership, when, as you're saying, if you have lived as a rental or in a rental or as a tenant, you have called someone when something has gone wrong and they paid to have it fixed. Now, when something goes wrong, you have to pay to have it
right?
fixed. And let's just assume for a second that nothing's even gone wrong. Just maintenance on a home is something that you have to plan for and have money set aside for. So you don't want to be depleted to $0 in your bank account on closing day. And now you get to the house and 2 weeks later, the HVAC system dies,
Right.
which you had an inspection and everything seemed fine, but life has other plans sometimes, and you do have to be prepared for that. So it is best to also allow there to be some form of a maintenance emergency fund that is something you can have and contribute to the entire time you own a home.
So yeah, that will harken me back to something else that my father told us when we were kids. If you plug it in, it's essentially a light bulb. And a light bulb can go out at any minute. You don't know why, they just stop working. And doesn't matter whether it's a heater, a TV, your HVAC system, whatever. I mean, if you just need to be, like you said earlier on, psychologically prepared, which would mean being financially prepared. The best way for you to be psychologically prepared for anything is to be financially prepared for anything.
Mm-hmm.
So
This has been a great conversation on homeownership readiness, and we touched on so many different things while we were having this discussion that it opens us up to have a much more in-depth conversation on many other topics going forward. So I look forward to talking about credit, and I look forward to talking about how we can use homeownership for investing and all of the other potential things that come from homeownership and getting ready to buy a home.
that's awesome. Yes, I look forward to doing this again very soon. We can certainly take some deeper dives on a lot of those subjects and more. Till then, I'm Ed Marko.
And I'm Kim Von Dohren.
You have been listening to Brick by Brick. Be sure and subscribe, post questions for future episodes, or comment. This is a Super Squirrel production, Super Squirrel Studios, Stony Creek Mills, Pennsylvania.